but I actually do have the honor of introducing our next speaker. I want to ask you a little quiz, though, first. If you think about a dairy farm, a bicycle project, and an elected official, what do those things have in common? Well, if you're from Boise, you already know. If you're not from Boise, it is my pleasure to introduce the president of the Boise City Council, Jimmy Hallyburton.
Well, thank you so much, and great job, Michael. That was amazing. My name's Jimmy Hallyburton. I'm the Boise City Council President. I met quite a few of you yesterday. You're going to hear a lot of folks from Boise thanking you all for being here. I want to do it again. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the Music Policy Forum, for the folks who helped organize, and for the folks who traveled to Boise. If you're from out of town, will you just raise your hand really quick? Let's give those folks a round of applause. Thank you for being here. Hopefully there's some folks watching from out of town online as well, and I want to welcome them to Boise too. You all are doing incredible work all across the entire country. You're very, very important to your communities, and Boise is a pretty great place to live, so keep Boise on your radar. We love people who love cultural arts, and we want them to be in and around and supporting Boise, but we also are excited to be working with you on so many different things. I want to thank our City of Boise staff as well. We have a few folks here in the front row, Sean over there as well. Thank you, our City of Boise staff. As an elected official, you get to stand up here and you really get to take a lot of credit for all the work that city staff does. But everyone knows that they're really the ones doing the work, and in the best case scenario as an elected official, hopefully you're not messing it up all the time. So thank you for the work and bringing this to Boise. Give them a round of applause too. Yeah, thank you so much. I also want to just, on behalf of the mayor is not here today. She just got back into Boise from Dubai. She was on an 18-hour plane flight yesterday where she was at the UN conference on climate change. So she wants to welcome you all here as well today, and I want to make sure that you know how much she loves and she supports our cultural arts community. Sean asked me to speak and to welcome you all here a few weeks ago. I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to do that. I love welcoming people to Boise. And then I looked at the program, and it said keynote 15 to 30 minutes, and it's like, what is a guy with no musical background going to talk about for 15 minutes to a bunch of folks who have so much expertise when it comes to music and music policy? And so I kind of went back to the default of you talk about the things that you know about. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Boise, and I'm going to talk a little bit about bicycles at a music policy forum. We'll see how it goes. Some of you were here yesterday, and we were talking about what's the deal with Boise. Why is this here, and what makes Boise so special? And so some of these things you're gonna hear again. Boise is one of the most isolated major metropolitan areas in the lower 48. So for the Alaska folks, when I said in the country, that was very upsetting to them yesterday. They are very proud of how isolated they are, I guess. So we lose to Alaska, but other than that, we're the most isolated major metropolitan area in the country. Alaska's got us beat there. We are one of the very few progressive cities in one of the reddest states in the entire country. Boise is the very first city in Idaho to host a pride parade that started 34 years ago. We were actually one of the first in the Northwest, and we now have one of the largest pride parades and pride festivals in the entire Northwest. 75,000 people here last year. The city of Boise sponsors that parade. Our staff and our elected officials march at the front of that parade because we know how important it is to our LGBTQ plus community all over the state of Idaho to know that Boise, their capital city, is a place where they are welcome, where they belong, where they add value, and we are so proud of that part of our community. We are also have one of the highest amount of refugee resettlement population per capita in the entire country. A lot of people don't know that about Boise. In an area that's not very diverse, we have people living here from all around the world, tens of thousands of them. And in a disproportionate number, in a very good way, there also are local artists, there are entrepreneurs, there are business owners. They create change all across our community, and we are so proud and so lucky to have our refugee community here, and it's intentional. The city of Boise just got recertified as a welcoming city, and one of the reasons why, oh, thank you. One of the reasons why is that we work to be that. The city sponsors and we host a group called our Neighbors United, and it's a quarterly meeting when all of our different refugee resettlement providers, transportation agencies, medical offices gather together and make sure that we're not working in silos, that we're all working together to make sure that we can continue to welcome people who need a home from all around the world. It's an intentional thing that we do, and it doesn't have to be that way, but by gathering folks together, by creating policy and committing to it and paying for it, we have a thriving refugee community in Boise that we love so much. A couple of things that aren't related to that. We're also the only major city in the entire country that doesn't own and operate its own streets. This will come into play a little bit later. When you're walking down our streets, city has no control over those. That's the county. That's absolutely insane if you're a transportation advocate. For you, you'll know why that's important in just a little bit. We're also one of the only, we are the only state in the entire country, Idaho is, that doesn't provide funding for public transportation. Also not a good thing. The city of Boise is also one of the only cities in Idaho that really invest in its cultural arts scene. We have a Percent for Art program at our airport, in our public works, and across the entire city. One of our staff members here, Jennifer Stevens, helped expand the definitions of public art of art recently to make sure that it includes performing art and all sorts of different types of art with those investments. Thank you so much. We have a city cultural arts ambassador program. We actually had 2 award winners of our cultural ambassadors at the intensive yesterday. We've got one of them in here today, Treefort, who I think have received it 2 times, $20,000 a year for a 2-year period of time. We've had this in place for about 10 years, maybe a little bit longer, and I think that Treefort was the recipient twice when you all were first getting started. And so the city really invested in Treefort, invested in other organizations as our cultural ambassadors at a time when they really needed help getting off the ground. Those are policies that we have in place. That's a little bit about Boise. Here's a little bit about my background and a little bit about bicycles. And this is where we're gonna try to tie some stuff in together. I grew up in Boise. I grew up riding a bicycle. The only rule that I really had growing up was be home by dinner. I rode my bicycle to school. I rode it to the grocery store. I rode it all over the foothills. That's what childhood was to me, and that's kind of what I assumed childhood was like for every single kid that was in Boise. When I was a teenager, I started working at a bike shop. One of the things I started to see is that there was people that would come in, and there were kids who needed bicycles and they couldn't afford them. Or they had a bicycle that was broken that needed to get repaired, and they couldn't afford to repair their bicycle, or it was gonna cost more to repair their bicycle than it was already worth. And these were the folks who needed bicycles the most, and they were usually forced to buying really crappy bikes, or had bikes that were so terrible that they couldn't be repaired. This is when I started to realize that the system was broken. I started fighting fires for the Idaho City Hotshots, and I met somebody named Brian Anderson, the other co-founder of a nonprofit I started called the Boise Bicycle Project. He had the same background, riding a bike around as a kid, working in a bike shop, and seeing that the system was broken. And when we both saw that the system was broken, we knew it was bigger than we thought it was, and we knew that there was something that we could do about it. So when I was 25 years old, I started the Boise Bicycle Project, a nonprofit to try to make sure that everybody had access to a bicycle and to transform Boise into the bicycle capital of America. We wanted to create a culture. We wanted to create an identity for the city that would last far beyond ourselves. And so we started fixing up bicycles and donating bicycles to kids. Our first giveaway, I think we gave 47 bikes out to kids. We've given over 12,000 bicycles to kids, fixed and refurbished, secondhand used bikes to kids in the last 16 years. Thank you. But as we were doing it, we started to realize this incredible work that we were doing, this access to the bikes that we were giving, it wasn't enough. Because the kids we were giving bicycles to were riding around on streets that weren't safe. And oftentimes our lower income neighborhoods were the areas that were had the least amount of bicycle infrastructure for these kids to ride around on. So we knew that we had to do more. And we knew that there was a really big door open in Boise. This is around like 2008, 2009, in the middle of the Great Recession, but in the middle of a time where a lot of entrepreneurs were coming out of the woodwork to create their community, to reinvent the cities that they grew up in. And we started to realize that there was an opportunity to form an identity and do something more. We met with the mayor's office, at the time, and said, hey, we know that the city doesn't own its own streets, and so you don't think that there's anything that you can do. We do think that there's things that you can do. We believe that Boise has the potential to be the bicycle capital of America, and we think we can help you do that. And the mayor was like, great, like, what do you got? And we didn't have a plan. It's like, I'll come back to you with a plan. We came back a couple weeks later with 10 points of here's 10 things the city of Boise could do, and if we started doing them today, 10 years from now, we would be one of the best bicycle cities in the entire country. One of the first things is that we would form a mayor's bicycle advisory committee, and that's one of the first things that he had us do. And so then all of a sudden, all of our bicycle community folks, all of our different advocacy organizations, our bike shops, our people who rode daily, who had been involved in advocacy, they had a seat at the table. And that was really one of our first steps. A few years later, one of the kids that was riding around on one of our bicycles was hit. They survived, but it was an absolutely terrible crash. They got life flighted to Salt Lake City, and they barely made it. It was truly a miracle. And the community kind of started to rally around, like, what is it that we can do to make sure this never happens again? So we went to the governor, and we said, there's 3 things that you can do that can make crashes like this preventable and stop happening again. One of them was to make mandatory questions on the statewide driver's ed exam about bicycle and pedestrian safety. And so, thank you. So we created 12 questions, and we said, here's 12 questions. We want 3 of these questions on the test. Every single test that every single person has to take in Idaho. And what that meant was that when people were teaching driver's ed, those driver's ed instructors then had to make sure that they covered that section in a book. At a time when there was a lot of controversy of should bikes be on the road or should they not be on the road, when cars and bikes were not getting along very well, all of a sudden a new generation was being taught that bikes belong on the road, here's the rights that they have, and here's how you can share the road with them. And now everybody who takes that test learns that lesson. So we started getting in at the state level and talking about creating change. I mentioned this earlier, but the city of Boise doesn't own its own streets, the county does. They have their own set of elected officials. And we started to find that no matter how hard we were trying, we couldn't make a lot of our streets safer. We were addressing education, we were getting bikes out to kids, we were teaching them how to ride them safely. The roads were still dangerous to ride on. And we could not get these elected officials to actually design safer roads. So we started hosting a candidate forum every single year that there was an election. As a 501c3 nonprofit, we couldn't tell people who to vote for, we couldn't endorse anyone, we couldn't give money to anyone, but we could organize a conversation where we brought all of our bicycle and pedestrian advocates together, and we asked questions that mattered about bicycle and pedestrian related issues. And although we weren't telling people who to vote for, it was very clear which elected officials were going to support those policies. Since we started doing those, the bicycle-friendly candidates won time after time after time. And about 3 years ago, for the first time in Ada County's history, we have a majority bicycle and pedestrian-friendly elected official commission at ACHD. And now our roads are changing rapidly. So I'm telling you about all these things, and you're like, what the heck does this have to do, with music? It's policy. What I'm talking about is creating policy, I'm talking about creating change, and I'm talking about creating identity. There was a conversation that was happening yesterday, and it was sort of like, what is the definition of policy? And I wasn't sitting at that table, but I got to kind of hear the discussion going on in the background. And so I'm going to share what my definition is today. Policy is when you realize the system is broken. There was another conversation going around of, is the system broken or did it never work in the first place? Both. Policy is when you realize the system is broken and you move beyond reacting to it and you start changing it. As we're having these conversations today, that's something that I want you to think about. Is like, what are the things that we can stop reacting to? And what are the things that we can actually change? Another conversation that was happening yesterday is the window still open to create change? When we were trying to transform Boise in the bicycle capital of America, the window was wide open and we knew it, and we were moving as fast as we possibly could. I'll be honest and I'll tell you that the window is not as open as it was when we first started, but it is still open, and it's never gonna be more open than it is right now. I don't care where you live, whether it's Boise, whether it's Portland, Seattle, Anchorage, Alaska, the window is still open, and it's never gonna be more open than it is right now. For your folks in Boise, you have elected officials like myself, like Mayor McLean. You've got a highway commission that would support arts and music. Now is the time to move forward on these issues, and you are the experts. If you want to create good policy, you have to have the folks that are most affected by the policy, that have the lived experience and the professional experience to actually create good ones. If you want to create great bike policy, I'd be happy to be a part of it. I can help you write it. I can tell you what the issues are. If you want to create really bad music policy, have me write it. That's what you need to be doing. You need to be figuring out the answers to the problems, and you need to be bringing those to elected officials like myself so we can work with you to get those policies in place. That's what our job is, and we are desperate to have your expertise at the table. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. It's such an honor for me to be here. It's such an honor for me as someone born and raised in Idaho for this event to be hosted here. I know all of our City of Boise staff, our elected officials, our mayor feels the same. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day.